Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
The place I worked at was one of those fancy dinner in a movie spots where people could order full meals while watching films. It meant we had a full kitchen running alongside multiple theaters, which created a constant stream of dirty dishes that never seemed to end. I worked as a dishwasher, which sounds simple enough, but it was actually pretty demanding. The dish machine was this massive industrial thing that took forever to heat up, drain, and clean properly. Most nights I'd be there until well past midnight, waiting for the last dishes to come in from the theaters. The setup was that the bosser would collect dishes from all the theaters when each movie ended, bring them back to the kitchen, and I'd run them through the machine. The problem was that movies ended at different times, and sometimes people would sit around when the credits finished, leaving their plates and glasses behind. This meant I never really knew when I'd gotten the last load of dishes for the night. The bosser who worked most of my shifts was this guy who'd been there for about 2 years. He had this weird relationship with management where they treated him like he was some kind of assistant manager, even though he was just a busser like any other employee. He'd gotten really tight with the general manager and a couple of the shift supervisors, always hanging around their office and acting like he was part of their inner circle. It went to his head in a big way. From day one, this guy treated me and the other dishwashers like we were beneath him. He'd bark orders at us, never say please or thank you, and act like he was our boss. Management never called him out on it. If anything, they seemed to encourage his attitude because he was reliable and had been there longer than most people. The thing that really got under my skin was how he'd handle the end-of-night dish runs. He'd come into the kitchen with a load of dishes and tell me that it should be the last batch for the night, or that there was just one more load coming after this one. But it was never true. Without fail, 20 minutes later he'd show up with another full tub of dishes, acting like it was no big deal that I'd already started shutting down the machine. When getting burned by this a few times, I developed a habit of asking him directly whether he was absolutely sure he had everything. I'd ask if he was positive this was everything and whether I should wait a few more minutes before starting the shutdown process. Most of the time, he'd get annoyed and insist he was sure, only to prove me right when he showed up with more dishes later. This particular night started like any other. It was a Saturday, so we were busy with people coming to the late shows. I've been running dishes steadily since about 9 o'clock, load after load of plates, glasses, and silverware. The machine was running hot and everything was going smoothly. Around 11:30 p.m., he came back with what looked like a pretty full load. He dropped the tubs on my counter with his usual attitude and told me this should be the last of it for the night. I'd heard this before, so I wasn't about to get fooled again. I asked him if he was sure and whether I should wait a bit longer before starting to shut down the machine. His whole demeanor changed. He snapped at me to shut the machine down immediately and walked out of the kitchen before I could say another word. I stood there for a second, kind of shocked by how aggressive he'd gotten. Usually he was just condescending, but this was different. He seemed really worked up about something. I figured maybe he'd had a rough night with difficult customers, or the managers had been giving him grief about something. Either way, I wasn't about to argue with him when he was clearly in a bad mood. Plus, I was tired and wanted to go home just like he apparently wanted to leave. So I loaded up his dishes and ran them through the machine. While they were washing, I started the shutdown process. First, I had to let the machine finish its cycle and drain all the water out. Then I had to scrub down the inside, clean the filters, and sanitize everything for the next shift. It was a good 20-minute process even when I moved quickly. The whole time I was cleaning, I kept thinking something felt off. It seemed early to be completely done with dishes, especially for a Saturday night. But he'd been so emphatic about shutting down immediately that I figured he must know something I didn't. Maybe they'd close the kitchen early or stop serving food in the theaters earlier than usual. I finished cleaning the machine and started wiping down my station. The floors needed to be mopped, the prep sinks needed to be cleaned, and I had to take out all the trash. By the time I finished everything, it was probably close to 12:30 a.m. I was grabbing my jacket from the break room when the shift manager found me to do my checkout. This was standard procedure. They'd check that I completed all my closing tasks and then clock me out. We were walking through the kitchen so he could verify everything was clean when I saw something that made my stomach drop. There he was, the busser who'd yelled at me to shut down immediately, standing by the dish pit with two completely full bus tubs. He was quietly bagging up all the dishes in plastic bags, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. When he saw me and the manager approaching, his face went completely pale. The manager asked what was going on and why there were dishes that didn't get washed. The busser started stammering, trying to come up with some explanation. He claimed these were dishes he'd just found in Theater 6 and that someone must have missed them earlier, but I could see the lie written all over his face. These weren't just a few leftover plates. There were 2 full tubs worth of dishes, easily 40 or 50 place settings with glasses, silverware, and everything. This was clearly a substantial amount that he'd somehow missed during his rounds. The manager pointed out that this was a lot of dishes to just find and asked when he'd done his final sweep of the theaters. The busser stumbled over his words, saying he thought he'd gotten everything but trailing off without finishing his sentence. He was obviously caught. The manager was annoyed, which was understandable since now someone would have to come in early tomorrow to deal with all these dirty dishes. He asked why the busser hadn't brought these back when he found them, since the dish machine had still been running at that point. The busser made the mistake of looking at me. I could see in his eyes that he remembered exactly what had happened, how he'd cut me off and demanded I shut down immediately when I tried to ask if there were more dishes coming. I explained to the manager that I had asked if there might be more dishes and offered to wait, but I was told to shut down right away. The manager's expression changed when he put the pieces together. He went back and forth between me and the busser, clearly realizing what had happened. The manager asked the busser directly if he had told me to shut down the machine when he knew there were still dishes to collect. The busser couldn't even respond. He just stood there holding a bag of dirty silverware, wanting to disappear into the floor. The manager explained that this was going to create problems for tomorrow's opening shift, since they'd have to deal with all these dishes before they could start their prep work. What happened next was the most satisfying part of the whole situation. The manager made the busser stay an extra hour to hand wash every single dish in those tubs. Since the machine was already cleaned and shut down for the night, and turning it back on would have meant another full cleaning cycle, hand washing was the only option. I got to clock out and go home while he stood at the prep sink, scrubbing plates and glasses with a sponge. The manager stayed to supervise, making sure everything got cleaned properly. I heard later that he didn't get out of there until almost 2 a.m. But the real victory came in the weeks that followed. Word got around to the other managers about what had happened. Suddenly, his special treatment started disappearing. They stopped including him in their little management discussions. They started holding him accountable for his attitude toward other employees. And most importantly, they made it clear that dishwashers should be treated with respect, not ordered around by bussers who thought they were better than everyone else. He couldn't even look at me after that night. Whenever he brought dishes to my station, he'd just sit them down quietly and leave without saying a word. No more barking orders, no more condescending comments, no more acting like he was my supervisor. He ended up quitting about a month later. I heard that he'd gotten into some kind of argument with one of the real managers and walked out during his shift. I can't say I was sorry to see him go. I'm a 34-year-old woman who works as a dental hygienist in our small town. My life has been pretty straightforward. I have my own place, pay my bills on time, and try to be there for my family when they need me. My younger sister has been different, though. She's the type who seems to find drama wherever she goes, and she's also really good at making people feel sorry for her. 8 months ago, my world turned upside down when my sister called me crying. She told me she had been diagnosed with cancer and that she was going to start chemotherapy soon. I was shocked and offered to help however I could. She said she was scared and that the doctors told her it was aggressive, but they caught it early enough that treatment should work. Within a week of her announcement, our parents had packed up and moved into her apartment to help take care of her during treatment. My mom quit her part-time job to be available full-time and my dad rearranged his work schedule to be home more often. I watched them transform into full-time caregivers overnight, cooking special meals, driving her to what I thought were appointments, and putting their entire lives on hold. At first, I didn't question anything. Cancer is serious and family comes first. But over the months, things started to feel off. My sister had shaved her head completely bald, which she said was because the chemotherapy was making her hair fall out anyway. She would talk about how tired the treatments made her and how sick she felt afterward. Yet somehow she was going out to bars and restaurants several nights a week with friends. When I asked her about having so much energy, she would get defensive and say that she was trying to live her life as normally as possible. She said her doctor encouraged her to stay social and active when she felt up to it. That made sense, I guess, but something still felt wrong. The biggest red flag was that she never let anyone come to her appointments with her. Not our parents, not me, nobody. When mom offered to drive her or sit in the waiting room, my sister would get upset and say she needed to handle this on her own. She said having people there made her more anxious. Our parents respected her wishes, but I thought it was strange. Most people going through cancer treatment want support during appointments. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. She never seemed to lose weight, which is common with chemotherapy. Her skin looked healthy, and she never seemed to have the nausea or fatigue that usually comes with aggressive treatment. When I mentioned this to our parents, they said everyone responds to treatment differently and that we should be grateful she was handling it so well. The truth came out completely by accident. I was at the coffee shop downtown last week when I ran into the office manager from what I thought was my sister's oncologist office. I know her because she goes to my church and we've chatted before. I decided to mention how grateful our family was for how well the doctor was taking care of my sister. The office manager looked confused and asked who I was talking about. I explained that my sister had been coming there for chemotherapy for months. She told me she handled all the scheduling and billing, so she knew every patient they had. When I gave her my sister's name, she said they had never had a patient by that name. My heart started racing when I realized what this might mean. I thanked her and left quickly, my mind spinning with possibilities. I spent the next few days calling other oncology offices in the area, pretending to be confirming appointments. None of them had any record of my sister as a patient. I felt sick to my stomach when the reality started to sink in. I decided to confront my sister directly. I went to her apartment when I knew our parents would be out running errands. I sat her down and told her I needed to know the truth about her cancer diagnosis. Her face went white. She tried to deny it at first, but when I told her about my conversation with the office manager and my calls to other offices, she completely broke down. She started crying and admitted that she had been lying about everything. Through her tears, she confessed that she never had cancer and that she had made it all up. I asked her why she would do something like this, and she explained that she was in so much debt that she couldn't afford her rent anymore and was about to get evicted. She knew our parents would help if they thought she was really sick. She went on to explain that she had gotten herself into serious financial trouble with credit cards and had lost her job months ago. Instead of asking for help or dealing with her problems honestly, she decided to fake a cancer diagnosis to get our parents to move in and support her financially. She had researched symptoms online and bought a wig that she could take off to make it look like she was losing her hair from chemotherapy. She would leave the apartment during the day claiming to go to treatment, but really she was just driving around or hanging out at friends' houses. She had even printed fake medical documents to show our parents when they asked about her treatment plan. I was furious. Our parents had completely disrupted their lives for her. They had spent their savings on special foods and supplements. Mom had given up her job. Dad was stressed constantly, worried about losing his daughter, and it was all based on lies. I told her she had 24 hours to tell our parents the truth, or I would tell them myself. She begged me not to make her do this, saying it would ruin her relationship with them forever. I told her she should have thought about that before she decided to fake having cancer. She asked if I could just keep this between us, explaining that she was going to stage a miraculous recovery next month anyway, and that no one had to know. She was still trying to manipulate the situation instead of taking responsibility for what she had done. 24 hours passed, and she didn't tell them. So yesterday I drove to her apartment and sat our parents down. I told them everything I had discovered and everything my sister had admitted to me. The look on their faces was devastating. My mom started crying and my dad just sat there in shock. They couldn't understand how someone could lie about something so serious. My mom kept saying she felt stupid for not seeing the signs, but I told her this wasn't her fault. My sister had deliberately deceived them. When my sister came home and realized what had happened, she exploded at me. She screamed about how I could do this to her and that I had no right to expose her like this. I told her I had every right and that our parents deserved to know the truth. She yelled that I had ruined her life and that family was supposed to protect each other, not expose each other like this. I responded that family was also supposed to be honest with each other, and what she did was cruel and selfish. She insisted that she would have told them eventually and that she was planning to say the treatment worked and she was in remission. I asked her if she was just going to keep lying forever. Our parents packed up their things that same day and moved back to their own house. My sister is now facing eviction and has no one to help her because she burned every bridge with her lies. She's been calling me nonstop, alternating between begging for forgiveness and screaming at me for ruining her plan. I don't feel guilty about what I did. Our parents had a right to know they were being manipulated. My sister made her choices and now she has to live with what happened. I just wish I had figured it out sooner and saved our parents months of unnecessary worry and stress. I'm 28 years old and work as a software developer from home. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia after months of unexplained pain, fatigue, and brain fog. It's one of those invisible disabilities that people don't understand because I look perfectly healthy on the outside. Some days are better than others, but the bad days can be absolutely brutal. Walking long distances, standing for extended periods, or even carrying groceries can leave me in severe pain for days. My doctor helped me get a handicapped parking placard about 2 years ago. I was hesitant at first because I felt guilty using it when I didn't look disabled, but my doctor explained that these permits exist for people like me too. The shorter walk from handicapped spaces to store entrances makes a huge difference on my bad days. Yesterday was one of those bad days. I've been having a flare-up for 3 days straight, and I was completely out of groceries. I really didn't want to leave the house, but I needed basic supplies and my medication refill from the pharmacy. I drove to the large chain grocery store near my apartment, the one with the huge parking lot that's always packed. When I arrived, I was relieved to see an open handicapped parking space right near the front entrance. I pulled in, hung my placard on the rearview mirror where it's supposed to go, and grabbed my purse. I was getting out of my car when I noticed a woman in her 50s watching me from a few spaces away. She had that look on her face, you know the one, like she was already planning something. I locked my car and started walking toward the store entrance when she approached me. She loudly called out for my attention, demanding that I stop. When I turned around, already feeling tired from just a short walk, she told me that I couldn't park in that handicapped spot. I pointed out that I had a valid permit hanging clearly in my windshield. She refused to believe me, claiming that the permit wasn't really mine and that I must have stolen it or borrowed it from someone else. I told her she could check the name on it if she wanted to verify it was mine, but she wasn't interested in facts. She said that I wasn't really handicapped because I looked young and had walked normally to my car. She said I was taking up a space from people who actually needed it. I felt my face getting hot. This wasn't the first time someone had questioned my right to use handicapped parking, but it never got easier. I explained that I had fibromyalgia, which is an invisible disability, and that I had every right to park there. Her response made my blood boil. She claimed that fibromyalgia wasn't a real condition and that it was just an excuse used by lazy people. She suggested I was probably just depressed or making things up. I was already exhausted and in pain, and now I had to deal with this woman's ignorance. I told her that I didn't owe her any explanation, that my permit was completely valid, and that I was going to do my shopping now. I turned to walk away, but she actually grabbed my arm. She threatened to call the police on me for using the handicapped spot illegally. I told her to go ahead and call them because they would tell her exactly what I was telling her. She finally let go of my arm and pulled out her phone while I went into the store, hoping she'd be gone by the time I finished shopping. I spent about 40 minutes in the store moving slowly through the aisles because walking was becoming increasingly painful. I got my groceries and my prescription, paid for everything, and headed back to the parking lot. The woman was still there, now with two other people who looked like they might be her friends or family members. I approached my car and she started yelling again, pointing at me and announcing to her companions that I was the faker who had stolen the handicapped spot. Her friends looked uncomfortable, but she was just getting started. She complained loudly that she had been waiting there for 40 minutes and had called the police, but they told her they couldn't do anything because I had a permit. She said that she knew I was faking my disability. I repeated what I had told her before about having fibromyalgia and asked her to please just leave me alone. I started loading my groceries into my car, trying to ignore her, but she kept ranting. She told me about her mother, who had real disabilities and could barely get around, claiming that I was taking up spaces from people like her. I pointed out that there were 6 other handicapped spaces in the parking lot that her mother could have used. She angrily replied that they were all taken because of people like me. I finished loading my groceries and got into my car. I started backing out of the space when she moved behind my car to block me. She said that I wasn't leaving until I admitted I was faking my condition. I warned her to get away from my car right now or I would call the police myself. She said she wasn't moving and told me to go ahead and call them. That's when things got really crazy. She started hitting the back of my car with her fists, then moved around to the side and began kicking the door hard. She kept screaming that I was a faker and a liar, saying that people like me made her sick. Her friends were trying to get her to stop, but she was completely out of control. She moved to the front of my car and started kicking the bumper and hood. I was honestly scared at this point and had my phone ready to call 911. But then she decided to give my car one final extra hard kick with her right foot. She put everything she had into it, like she was trying to punt a football. I heard this awful sound, kind of like a pop mixed with a crack, and she immediately screamed and fell to the ground. She was rolling around on the asphalt, clutching her right foot and screaming about her ankle. Her friends rushed over to help her, and other people in the parking lot started gathering around to see what was happening. One of her friends asked what had happened and if she was okay. Even while writhing in pain, she managed to blame me, claiming that I had made her hurt herself and that it was all my fault. I got out of my car to see if she was seriously injured. Her ankle was already starting to swell and it was bent at a weird angle. I said that I was calling an ambulance. She told me not to dare, still saying this was my fault and that I would have to pay for her medical bills. Her other friend suggested they should call 911 because the ankle looked really bad. I called 911 anyway and explained what happened. The dispatcher said they were sending both police and paramedics. While we waited, the woman kept blaming me for her injury and threatening to sue me. She kept saying that I had parked illegally and caused her to get hurt while trying to stop me. I said that I had parked legally in a space I was entitled to use and that she had attacked my car and hurt herself in the process. Several people who had witnessed the whole thing came forward to back up my version of events. One person had even recorded part of it on their phone. A witness told her clearly that they had seen the whole thing, that I hadn't done anything wrong, and that she had been kicking my car and hurt herself. When the police and paramedics arrived, the officers took statements from everyone while the paramedics examined the woman's ankle. It was definitely dislocated, possibly broken too. The officer asked me if I had a valid handicapped parking permit. I said that I did and showed him both a permit hanging in my windshield and my driver's license. He checked my permit against my ID and said everything was legitimate. He then asked her if she had been kicking my vehicle. She tried to justify her actions by claiming I was parked illegally and that she was trying to get me to move. The officer explained to her that I had a valid permit and was allowed to park there. However, she had committed vandalism by damaging my vehicle and could potentially be charged with harassment. The paramedics had to give her pain medication before they could move her ankle back into place. She kept screaming and blaming me the entire time. One paramedic told her they needed to take her to the emergency room for x-rays because the ankle was definitely dislocated and might be fractured. They loaded her onto the stretcher and she was still yelling at me, saying that this wasn't over and that she was going to sue me for everything I had. The officer suggested that she might want to focus on her own legal problems right now. After she was taken away in the ambulance, the officer finished taking my statement and looked at the minor damage to my car where she'd been kicking it. He asked if I wanted to press charges for vandalism. I told him I just wanted to go home and thought she had learned her lesson. He said that if I changed my mind, I had his card. He also told me that I had done nothing wrong and that some people just don't understand that not all disabilities are visible. I was still shaken up by the confrontation, but there was also a part of me that felt satisfied. Not because she got hurt, but because her own actions had results. She spent so much energy trying to punish me for something I had every right to do, and ended up hurting only herself. I later found out from a friend who works at the hospital that she did indeed fracture her ankle and needed surgery. She was in a cast for 8 weeks. I never heard from her again about any lawsuit, probably because multiple witnesses and a video recording proved that I did nothing wrong. I still use my handicapped parking permit when I need it, and I've never let another person's ignorance make me feel guilty about it. Let's just say that my job involves a lot of lifting heavy boxes and dealing with grease-covered engine parts all day. By the time 5 o'clock rolls around, I'm usually exhausted and just want to get home to my apartment where I can crash on the couch with a cold beer. The drive home is normally pretty straightforward. I take the same route every day, hop on the highway for about 20 minutes, then exit onto the local roads. My car isn't much to look at. It's a 10-year-old sedan that I bought used from a guy on Craigslist. The paint is faded, there's a small dent on the passenger side door, and the air conditioning makes weird noises. But it gets me where I need to go. That's all that matters to me. On this Tuesday, I was running a bit late leaving work because my supervisor needed help loading a truck at the last minute. Traffic was already building up by the time I got on the highway, which meant everyone was going to be fighting to get home. I merged into the right lane and settled in for what I figured would be a typical slow crawl. That's when I noticed something weird happening ahead of me. In the fast lane, there was this fancy sports car. I could tell it was expensive just by looking at it, sleek lines, chrome everywhere, and the engine had that deep rumble that only comes from serious horsepower. But here's the thing that made no sense. This car was going way under the speed limit. We're talking maybe 50 miles per hour in a 65 zone. Right next to it in the middle lane was a black SUV, one of those big luxury models that costs more than I make in 2 years. This SUV was going just slightly faster than the sports car, maybe 55. I could see someone in the back seat of the SUV with what looked like a professional camera taking pictures through the window. I was stuck behind a dump truck in the right lane, and we were all crawling along at this ridiculously slow pace. The dump truck driver was getting frustrated too. I could see him gesturing in his cab and shaking his head. After a few minutes of this nonsense, I decided I'd had enough. There was a gap between the dump truck and the SUV, so I signaled and merged into the middle lane. I figured I could at least get around these slowpokes and make up some time. When I got behind the SUV, I realized what was really going on. The photographer in the back seat was taking rolling shots of the sports car. They were using the highway as their personal photo studio, and they didn't care that they were backing up traffic for miles behind them. I tried to be patient for another few minutes, but this was getting ridiculous. Cars were starting to pile up behind us, and I could see other drivers getting angry. The construction zone ahead meant the 3 lanes were about to merge down to 2, which was going to make this whole mess even worse. Finally, I saw my chance. There was a decent gap between the SUV and the sports car, probably enough room for 2 cars. I put on my turn signal and started to move over. That's when things got really annoying. The SUV driver saw what I was trying to do and immediately slowed down even more. At the same time, the sports car sped up just enough to close the gap. They were deliberately trying to box me in. The photographer in the SUV actually turned around and started waving at me through the back window. He was making these exaggerated hand gestures, pointing back toward the right lane like he was telling me to get lost. He kept shouting at me to go back and leave them alone, waving me off like I was some kind of pest that was ruining his precious photo session. The nerve of this guy was unbelievable. Here I am, just trying to get home from work like everyone else, and these people think they own the highway. That's when I lost my patience. I dropped back a bit, then floored it until I was right on the SUV's bumper. I started laying on my horn, not just quick beeps, but holding it down for long stretches. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. The photographer spun around in his seat, and I could see him getting agitated. He started gesturing more frantically and yelling at me about what was wrong with me and to back off. But I wasn't backing down. I stayed right on their tail, honking away. But I wasn't done yet. Every time he tried to line up a shot of the sports car, I would gun my engine and surge forward, then slow down, then speed up again. My old sedan might not look like much, but it could still make some noise when I really stepped on it. I made sure to time these bursts of speed perfectly to mess up whatever photos he was trying to take. The sports car driver was starting to get the picture too. I could see him looking in his mirrors, probably wondering what all the commotion was about behind him. He rolled down his window and shouted back, asking what was going on. The SUV driver yelled back that some idiot wouldn't leave them alone, clearly talking about me. I kept up the honking and the erratic driving for another minute or two. The photographer had given up trying to take pictures and was now just glaring at me through the back window. The SUV driver was getting flustered, swerving slightly trying to figure out what to do. Finally, the sports car driver had enough. He slowed down and moved slightly to the right, creating a gap for me to pass. I guess he realized that dealing with me was more trouble than it was worth. I shot through the opening and finally got past both vehicles. When I pulled ahead, I looked in my rearview mirror and smiled at what I saw. The dump truck that had been behind me this whole time was now right on their bumper. The truck driver had been stuck in this slow-moving mess just like me, and he wasn't happy about it either. He was flashing his lights and honking his much louder horn at the SUV and sports car. The photographer was frantically waving at the dump truck driver now, trying to get him to back off just like he had done with me. But dump truck drivers don't mess around. This guy stayed right on their tail, making it impossible for them to continue their little photo session. I could see the SUV driver telling the photographer that this wasn't working and they needed to get off the highway. The photographer complained that they didn't get the shots they needed, but the SUV driver said it was too bad and they'd have to find somewhere else. I watched in my rearview mirror when the SUV moved over to the right lane followed by the sports car. They took the next exit, probably to find some empty back road where they could do their photo shoot without annoying regular people who just wanted to get home. The dump truck driver gave a satisfied honk of his horn when they disappeared down the exit ramp. Traffic immediately started flowing normally again, and everyone could finally drive at reasonable speeds. 2 years ago, I was desperately searching for a decent apartment in the city that wouldn't eat up my entire paycheck. I work as a designer for a mid-sized marketing company, and while the pay is okay, rent prices around here are absolutely insane. That's when I met my current roommate through a mutual friend. She worked in retail management at the time and seemed responsible enough. We found this decent 2-bedroom place, and even though my room was a bit bigger, we agreed to split everything 50-50 since I do most of the cooking and grocery shopping. It seemed fair. For the most part, living together has been pretty smooth. She's generally clean, doesn't bring random people over, and we've had some good times watching movies together on weekends. We're not best friends, but we get along well enough. That's why when she came to me last month looking stressed out, I didn't hesitate to help. She had just gotten laid off from her retail job. The company was downsizing, and despite being there for 3 years, she was one of the casualties. She was obviously worried about rent, utilities, and everything else. When she nervously asked if I could cover her portion of the rent until she found something new, I immediately agreed without even thinking about it. I mean, we're friends, right? And times are tough for everyone. I won't lie though, covering an extra $800 a month was definitely stretching my budget. I had to cancel a weekend trip I'd been planning with some college friends. We were going to rent a cabin upstate, nothing fancy, but it was something I've been looking forward to for weeks. I told myself it was the right thing to do and that she'd pay me back once she got back on her feet. So yesterday I'm coming home from a particularly long day at work. My boss had been on my case about a client presentation, and I was just ready to collapse on the couch with some takeout. But when I walked through the front door, I stopped dead in my tracks. There she was, sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by shopping bags and bubble wrap, carefully unpacking what was obviously a brand new laptop. Not just any laptop either. I could see the Apple logo gleaming on the back. She also had several clothing bags scattered around her, the kind from those trendy boutiques downtown that charge a fortune for basic t-shirts. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. This woman, who just last week was talking about how stressed she was about money, was unwrapping what had to be thousands of dollars worth of stuff. I asked her where she got the money for all this expensive stuff. She looked up and I could see her face change immediately. The excitement she'd had while unpacking vanished, replaced by this defensive expression I'd never seen before. She told me her parents had sent her money for her birthday, speaking in a way that made it sound like I shouldn't even be questioning her about it. I pressed further, asking if her birthday money really bought her a MacBook and a whole new wardrobe. She got more defensive and insisted it wasn't a whole wardrobe, and that, yes, her parents were very generous this year. I felt my blood pressure rising. Here I was, eating ramen for lunch every day to make sure I could cover her rent, and she's out shopping like she won the lottery. I told her straight up that if she had money to spend on luxury items, she should pay me back the rent money I covered for her, reminding her that I wasn't exactly rolling in cash either. That's when things got really ugly. Her whole demeanor shifted, and she got this indignant look on her face. She claimed that the money her parents gave her was specifically for these things, like it was some kind of designated fund that couldn't be touched for anything else. I asked her what purpose required a $2,000 laptop when she was unemployed. She insisted she needed it for job applications and building her portfolio, then had the nerve to remind me that I had volunteered to help her with rent and that I hadn't set any conditions. She was actually trying to make me feel bad for asking to be paid back money I lent her while she was spending freely on other things. I explained to her that I volunteered because I thought she was in genuine financial trouble and that I had missed my weekend with friends to help her out. I told her I'd been eating cheap meals to stretch my budget just to cover her expenses. She accused me of being materialistic and claimed I didn't understand what she was going through. And then she started crying. Actually crying like I was a villain in this situation. Through her tears, she explained that she'd been so depressed about losing her job and her parents just wanted to cheer her up. She said this stuff was supposed to help her feel better and get back on track. I tried to be reasonable and told her I understood that losing her job sucked, but that I wasn't her personal bank. I explained that if she could afford to drop thousands on shopping therapy, she could afford to pay her rent. She kept sobbing and accused me of being unsympathetic, saying she thought we were friends. The manipulation was unreal. She was actually trying to guilt-trip me for wanting my money back, while she sat there surrounded by designer bags and expensive electronics. I reminded her that we were friends, which was exactly why I helped her in the first place. But that friendship goes both ways. I told her she couldn't expect me to subsidize her lifestyle while she spent birthday money on luxuries. She insisted it wasn't like that at all and that I was completely misunderstanding the situation. She kept going on about how the money from her parents was designated for specific things and how I was being unreasonable. According to her logic, birthday money existed in some separate financial universe where debt didn't matter. The argument went on for another 20 minutes, with her getting more dramatic and me getting more frustrated. She kept insisting that I had volunteered to help, like that meant I'd signed up to be her permanent financial support system while she lived it up on her parents' dime. Finally, I just walked away. I went to my room and ordered pizza, eating it while listening to her stomping around the apartment. This morning, I woke up to find an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was exactly half of the rent money I'd covered for her, along with a note written in her dramatic handwriting. The note said she'd pay me the other half when she could, but that she was disappointed in how materialistic and unsympathetic I've been. She also wrote that she wouldn't be speaking to me much anymore because of how I treated her during her time of need. I had to laugh at the audacity. She gives me half my money back like she's doing me some huge favor, then tells me she's giving me the silent treatment as punishment for daring to ask for what she owes me. But here's the thing that really gets me. She's still using that shiny new laptop. I can hear her typing away in her room, probably applying for jobs on her $2,000 necessity. And this morning I saw her wearing one of those expensive new outfits while making coffee in the kitchen. She didn't say a word to me, just gave me this cold look like I'd somehow wronged her. The whole situation is completely backwards. I'm the one who helped her out when she needed it, and somehow I've become the bad guy for expecting to be paid back when she clearly has access to money. According to her twisted logic, I should just be grateful that she's graciously giving me half of what she owes me while continuing to spend freely on herself. I've been going over this situation in my head, wondering if maybe I was too harsh. But honestly, the more I think about it, the more ridiculous her behavior seems. She's treating birthday money like it's some sacred fund that can be touched for mundane things like rent, while expecting me to just eat the cost of supporting her lifestyle. What really bothers me is how she tried to make me feel guilty for asking for my money back. The tears, the accusations of being materialistic, the whole routine about me not understanding what she was going through, it was all calculated to make me back down and stop asking questions about her spending. Well, joke's on her. I'm not backing down, and I'm definitely not apologizing for expecting her to honor her debts. If she wants to give me the silent treatment while parading around in her expensive new clothes, that's her choice. But she's still going to pay me back every penny she owes me, birthday money or not. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.